going for Monday, June 3rd, 2024. Depends upon what clock you look at. It says 9 o'clock here and 9:02 on my computer. So I don't, gavel, call to order. And so I would like to. It's did that before too. Oh, no, it's done that before.
Technology is great until it doesn't.
Exactly. If it doesn't.
Bring it back.
Okay, didn't repeat. No. Could ask Jordan to come in. Let's see. Mhm.
Reinforces our faith in AI, doesn't it?
Just a little bit.
Turn the world over to computers and we suffer the consequences.
Sit now and see. Technical help.
Oh, did you check your name? with the phone?
Is it, we just mute this, right? Computer? Somebody speak into the mic so we can see if it's repeating.
Testing, 1, 2, 3. You know, in the old days, we just did this at James Street around a table.
Yep, things have changed.
Nice. So it's actually,
Things have changed since then.
because right now the view is. general.
She just loves it there.
Does she?
Yes.
Really good.
Every time we pick her up.
Is this Robin?
Yeah. Coming
Hey,
back.
Robin?
Anyway,
Oh, so sorry.
It's only 3 minutes late. That's a miracle.
Yeah, it's
Yes,
perfect.
you
And they
did
had some
great.
technical problems, so it's perfect.
Okay. It is what it is. She uses a walker.
Good morning, I'm Dave. Nice to meet you.
Oh, yes.
Does she? Oh, good. Good. Oh, that's good.
Gretchen.
Nice to meet you.
Donna. You were in Louisiana.
You'll be
for a
great.
couple of years.
You're gonna be great.
And she ended up spending 5 weeks there. And
Mhm.
Are we ready? Awesome. Okay. All right. So, and we gained another member, so that's wonderful. So I just wanted to acknowledge that Stephen Savage and this is Robin Wick are our new CMH board members, and both will be filling our primary consumer positions. So thank you for doing so and welcome. And so after that, we're going to move on. In lieu of the invocation, I would like to start out with a moment of silence. Today, the board of CMHOC will pause for a moment of silence as we remember the life of Kira Rockman. She's a wife of our fellow board member, Stephen, and a mother to Sam.
Mm.
Kira Rockman left our worldly domain on May 26, 2024, and will be forever missed. Kira has been described by her friends as one of the kindest, gentlest souls you have ever met. She made friends wherever she went. Kira was a devoted mother and a beloved wife. Kira had to abdicate for her son for his entire life, for his educational rights, public mental health rights, and the rights of those with intellectual and developmental disabilities. The world has lost a beautiful soul, and God in heaven have gained an angel. Let us take a moment to remember Kira Rockman and say a prayer for Sam and Stephen. Thank you. Thank you. So just a reminder, number 3, action item, it's not an action item, but item number 3 is our CMHOC mission and vision statements. The mission statement is Community Mental Health of Ottawa County partners with people with mental illness, intellectual and developmental disabilities, and substance use disorders, and the broader community to improve the lives and be a premier mental health agency in Michigan. Our vision is Community Mental Health of Ottawa County strives to enhance quality of life for all residents. Moving on to item number 4 is public comment. For those of you in the audience who would like to make a public comment, please come to the podium. You have 3 minutes. Announce your name and where you vote, and the floor is yours.
I believe I was number 1 on the list.
Barbara Lee Van Horsen.
Barbara Lee Van Horsen, City of Grand Haven, and the Momentum Center. We are a topic on the agenda today, so I thought it was important to point out that I did not bring members with me to this meeting. We did have a lot of members asked to be brought here, but I couldn't in good conscience do that. The last time we brought members to a CMH board meeting, they opened their hearts and shared their pain and their struggles, and members of this board rolled their eyes. Members of the audience laughed. People shared with me afterward the trauma they experienced and the hatred they felt in this room. Our members are not here this morning to share their stories because I couldn't trust that a community mental health board meeting was a safe place for people who are struggling with mental illness, which is especially striking given the results of the community health needs assessment that were released 2 weeks ago. Key finding number 1, mental health continues to be the most significant health issue and has declined due to the COVID-19 pandemic and social factors. Over 34% of Ottawa County adults have some degree of psychological distress, almost twice the rate it was in 2020. Over 16% report poor mental health, the highest it's been across all of the assessments and higher than the national rate. And the rate doubles again for underserved adults. About 34% of adults have an anxiety disorder and 27% have a depressive disorder. Both of these are the highest they have been, and depression is higher than both the state and the national rates. We are in a mental health crisis. There's no way around that truth. To even consider cutting mental health services during such a crisis is unconscionable and would be a clear dereliction of duty to the people you are entrusted with caring for. The Momentum Center is a program of CMH. I've answered your questions over and over again. I have provided data to you over and over again. I've responded to your recommendations and implemented changes to your program as you have requested. We create a $4 return for every dollar we receive from millage funding. Today, we have 324 members who rely on us for a sense of community and well-being. We are reducing depression, anxiety, loneliness, and feelings of stigma. If you have any interest in helping the residents of this county who struggle with mental illness, you will act to support our work. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else? Krista Mason. Hi, Krista.
Good morning. I'm Krista Mason, the director of Benjamin's Hope in Holland, Michigan, a resident of Holland, which is where I voted. I wanted to share with you this morning a little bit of information about the staffing crisis.
You did, yeah. No, can you? Very technical.
I'll project.
Okay, I was gonna say, there's no easy way to get you to that microphone over there. Yeah, staffing crisis. Yeah.
Share with you a staffing crisis that we are facing that is threatening our ability to operate. and I know this is true of providers across the county and across the state. Over the last few years, we've seen a 44% increase in our operating expenses across the board, products, particularly in rural health. And labor is 95% of our operating budget. These are 32 men and women who have needs that are complex, behaviorally complex, medically complex. And our desire, of course, is to continue to serve them with excellence. So I know you all are charged with the arduous challenge of deciding how funds are to be allocated. And I just want to raise your attention to this. The millage funds have been incredibly important to us over the last several years. And as we all know, those possibly make them expanded. And we have not seen a rate increase in years. We are facing a crisis. Our goal with our staff, we employ over 100 direct care workers, is to create a career path for them. We provide benefits for a woman. And these are expensive benefits to provide our staff. And they're so important for the men and women we serve. And we receive 5 to 10 calls a week from families that are participating in this services.
Sure.
So we value our partnership with Ottawa County CMH. We're committed to being transparent about what the cost of care is and respectfully request that you do what you're able to do to cover the cost of care so that we can continue to provide it.
Thank you. Krista, can I ask you, what's
Please.
the, oh, there you go, wage range for direct care workers? Do you know?
Yes. The creative wage right now is $17.20 an hour.
Okay.
For employees, the worker plus $2
Nice.
an hour.
You're right down the street. Yeah.
I will tell you, we're fundraising about $5 every hour. And that fundraising money would be going to other services that are not meant to be Medicaid funded if they were not required to be allocated to our staff. So what we're really looking at is a trajectory that is honestly unsustainable.
Okay. Thank you very much. And we'll work with the executive director to bring maybe a presentation together later on in the
I would
fall.
appreciate
Would you like that?
very
Okay.
much. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Are there any other public comments? Seeing none. All right. I'm going to move on. I'm going to make a motion to amend today's agenda to move agenda item 8 to agenda item 5, and then have all other items fall sequentially. This gives me an opportunity to introduce our interim executive director. And then let Dr. Brashears give his report. So I'm making that motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
And any discussion? All right. So Community Mental Health of Ottawa County and the board would like to take the opportunity to welcome back Dr. Michael Brashears to CMHOC as interim executive director. Dr. Brashears has a 30-year proven track record of success and a passion for the people he serves. Dr. Brashears' has leadership experience in both the private and the public mental health sector. He knows the barriers to care. He has developed solutions and has successfully built bridges to fill those gaps. We are grateful to Dr. Brashears and his willingness to serve as interim executive director. And we welcome Michael back to CMH of Ottawa County. Thank you. Now, executive director report.
I'm usually pretty loud, but can you hear me anyway? Okay, great. It's an honor to serve and to be back in this interim role. I've spent the last 2 weeks plus getting to know and visiting multiple employees and sites. And I have some general observations that I'd like to share, some specific concerns that I'd like to share. In subsequent meetings, my report will be in written form and you'll get it in advance, but I hold the right to add to it narratively since we have minutes. So I did send out an email to the board and to staff this morning about the highlights about what I'm reading. And if any member of the public wants it, just send me your email and I'll send it to you. So I'm going to start with some state level issues. And in the email I sent out yesterday, and you've heard about this the last subsequent months, there's an issue related to conflict-free access planning. My official position on that, and my observation of it, is support conflict-free access and planning, but not the methodology that the state would like to roll it out as. We should always support conflict-free anything. I will say there's an inherent conflict in the system regardless of what methodology you use to authorize services. But the goal is to ensure that our treatment teams, especially in the mentally ill side, are able to operate as true teams and not be subjected to having one organization. It's not just within your organization. One organization authorizing the service and the other one delivering. This works with some populations, but not so well with the mentally ill population in our team-based model. Just to remind the board and the community, any delay in service is dangerous. You heard Barbara get up here in public comment and talk about the percentages of people that are struggling. Any delay in the authorization and delay of services is dangerous. So instead of, and I know there's an agenda item today to consider a resolution opposing conflict-free access and planning by the state. I sent you that information. I'd like you to review it and ask questions to me over the next couple of weeks. In the next board meeting, we can see as a board if we want to write a formal resolution to oppose this. It's not an easy issue because especially with folks with developmental and disability, this has been kind of what we've been doing for a long time. We've been authorizing and planning, and really, if we're not careful, we could take the soul out of the self-determination movement out. So I want you to take time to review the material. I'll be setting up educational opportunities once again for the community and the board to participate in. Before we decide as a body if we should act like there's 46 CMHs, 42 have already said, yes, we're going to send a resolution opposing the way the state wants to. So without getting too much in the weeds, review the information. I gave you an infographic that was sent out from the state, and I'll be answering questions about that. But remember, we're for conflict-free, but we may be against how they want to roll it out. So that's what that first item is on my list. There was, and I can't pronounce this correctly, but there was a WASCL, is that how we say? I look at Anna, she knows. A WASCL settlement proposed by the state, which would increase the hourly salary to $31 an hour for consumers on the HAB waiver that are in self-determination. It's a narrow population. This is a lawsuit that if adopted statewide and applied, you heard Krista from Benjamin's Hope saying we started 17 folks that were providing the similar service outside of our AFC providers, adopt foster care providers, could get that wage up to 31 total cost, 28 or so to the actual worker. Right now, it's kind of like, well, why do that for that group? Why not pay fairly the wages for all direct care workers? Why just single out one group that needs it? So to me, my issue on this is if you do it for one group, state of Michigan, do it for all. Please properly fund the Medicaid system to meet our obligations. So I put that in your packet for consideration and reading, and I'll be asking this board next month to see if they want to weigh in on a position for or against. I hate that type of thinking for or against. However, my opinion, 2 weeks into the job, is we need to apply the same logic to all services, fund them appropriately. I'm not against self-determination providers earning a fair wage. Goodness, it's hard to find them. And families need help in this regard. But we have to be careful that one, it's like case law. We have attorneys on this board. It's like case law. It's going to expand eventually to all groups. And we would have to, and this is a number that I've heard that I haven't vetted yet, double the system by close to $1 trillion, $1 billion, excuse me, trillions. $1 billion in the state to meet this if we apply it across the board. So I will be providing more education and updates, and I want to give you a couple of weeks to look at this and may require that we say, hey, next week, what is our position? My gut is I know that I'll probably be recommending we're all for the appropriate funding, but we don't want to cause a financial crisis in the region unless the state actually is going to pay for the services that our residents deserve. So that's what that item is on the state. In your email and I'll send this up, I just want to remind people that the Board Association, the Community Mental Health Association of Michigan, sends a weekly update and has a link to all of these issues. If you haven't gotten it already, I'll make sure that you get that weekly so you understand at that level and what your colleagues at other boards are facing as board members. Very important that we have an active role in shaping the state from a board member perspective. There's also BoardWorks training that you may or may not be familiar with to certify, and I'll be asking our new board members to participate this, in becoming certified as the CMH board level through their association. There are several online trainings that you can take to educate you about the global mandates of being a board member. You have thousands of colleagues as board members. Let's get together with them. Let's make sure we're on the same page with them. So in that email I sent you is the link to the trainings, and there's also a conference coming up in June. And you know, the conferences are just getting back into the swing of things. COVID's taken a lot of things out of it, but they're very important for us to have 1 or 2 board members attend the conferences. This June, it's in Traverse City, which is a nice time to go. And we do, as a board, pay for you to go. So if you're interested, I have sent you an email with the actual agenda, the items they're covering. And even if you don't necessarily like the topics we're talking about, it's going into those board-specific committees and getting a sense regionally if we're dealing with the same things with On Point in Allegan or Health West with Muskegon. We can't just rely on the regional entity to connect us together. So I gave you that information to remind you, if you already know, and to suggest that as a board, we should be actively engaged in board association certification. I will be free to answer any questions related to that. I attended my first regional entity board meeting. It's been 11 years since I've attended a meeting in this role. I attended as a provider. We have good representation from the county. Sarah from Benjamin's Hope and Richard goes for us. And I'm not yet prepared to give you an analysis of what's going on at the regional level, but I do intend to include that in a systems look over the next 60 days of what's really going on in the region, how it impacts us, and how we can utilize the region to make sure we're meeting our obligations here at home in Ottawa County. One of the topics that was discussed was autism. One of our partners in our region has a pretty lengthy wait list. And the state has suggested to the region that if this particular CMH does not address their autism services waiting list, that maybe the region is going to have to step in and assume control of this. Frankly put, it's my belief, being on the provider side and now in this role, there's not enough resources given to meet our obligation, and we need to address that. Autism services have exploded, but the amount of providers and the ability to provide them has not grown at the same rate. As a result, even here in Ottawa, we're struggling to make sure we're doing a great job to meet people where they're at. And we'll be looking at our own, do we have a waiting list? If so, how big is it and how we address it? But it is a major topic at the regional level because the state has said that we must provide autism services with the funds we're given, and we cannot have, quote, a waiting list, even though that's almost impossible. So I will be keeping the board totally educated related to this because this is a threat to all CMHs. If we're not funded appropriately and have the providers to do so, how can we meet the obligations? So I'll be looking at that extensively. Am I going too fast? Is this okay?
No, great.
Sorry, it's been a very busy 2 weeks. Here internally at CMH, I developed some interim executive director decision-making principles. And I'll make sure you get that. I sent an email related to that. As an interim director, you have to be very careful. I'm going to have observations, get feedback from the public, from staff, from board members that might necessitate immediate change. As an interim, to me, it's inappropriate to fundamentally change the strategic plan or the budget of CMH without your input and approval. However, there may be times as an interim director that I have to prioritize decisions based on urgency and risk. I'll limit my decisions to those that have low impact to our current strategic plan during this interim period. To the degree possible, I'll utilize the consensus model of decision-making with leadership in the board, unless it's an emergency decision that I have to make instantly with your notification. I don't know what those would be, but just throwing it out there. I'm going to address current organizational needs based on a current examination of the systems look. I'll talk more about that in the SWOT analysis in a moment. And I'm going to prioritize decisions that are budget neutral unless there are emergent needs that I'll bring to your attention. And I'm going to ensure that decisions are in line with consumer choice and resident rights during this interim period. Over the last 2 weeks, I've had the opportunity to talk to over 70 employees. I've been at 2 sites, Hudsonville, I'm coming, I promise. And I will tell you, I need to they're all asking me, telling me, do this, do that. I have to prioritize this decision as an interim to ensure that I'm carrying out my stewardship appropriately. So I'm utilizing the principles that I just said, end up generating a series of questions that I've sent to you via email. They're just the reverse of those statements in a question form. So those are, is the decision in response to an urgent, emergent need or risk? Is the current decision I'm making in line with the current strategic plan? Currently, we have strategic priorities. I do not believe we have a CMHOC strategic plan. I could be wrong, but we have strategic priorities and many other plans. But I have to make sure that I'm in line with those. Does the decision require consensus from the leadership of board? Is the decision budget neutral? This will make my finance director very happy. Is the decision based on the results of current systems look or SWOT analysis? And does the decision uphold consumer choice and recipient rights? So I'm going to strive to use that topology and template of decision-making as I'm trying to make decisions with your help over this interim period. Do those make sense? Okay. SWOT analysis. Per the board bylaws, you're required to do a SWOT analysis when there's change of executive leadership. I have begun that process. I've initiated an initial SWOT analysis with all CMH departments and have gathered some preliminary data within the first 2 weeks. I'm going to aggregate that data, and then I'm going to offer opportunities for the board, the community, and county government to also provide input on the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats that they perceive to the system. I will then bring that report back to this board as a way to assist you as a board in completing the required SWOT analysis. I anticipate it will take me 30 to 45 more days to complete the process, but I will be providing updates and even information to the board on preliminary findings as I go. I also will be publishing them on the website for the community at large to see. Nothing about them without them. So I'm going to include that on the CMH website. It'll say SWOT analysis update. It might be hard for people to decipher. I'll have to make sure I deal with the 8,000 acronyms that we have to make sure that even I know what the heck I'm talking about. But please be advised that I took that mandate seriously within the first 2 weeks of my tenure as interim, and I've already completed an initial SWOT analysis of every CMH department. It's been a busy 2 weeks. Talked about meeting staff. I had the absolute honor of meeting with the parent advisory group this week. They are actually, I believe, scheduled to report to this board soon. I think we'll have to get that set up. The concerns were related to self-determination and access to care. Again, it was just a meet and greet. We did not do an exhaustive dialogue about issues, even though we were there close to 2 hours. I was welcomed very warmly. The parent advisory group said there's been a lot of progress this board has made in the last 2 years. And that's good to hear. Really, we need to develop, in my initial opinion, some milestones, key indicators that we'd like to achieve in the area of self-determination, access to service, and the other concerns that are brought up. Without measurable milestones, it's just talk. So we have to move on that. So this group will continue to work and develop that, and we will then bring it to the board. But it was an honor meeting with them, and I intend to meet with them regularly. Okay, I'm almost done, I promise. Initial observations over the past 2 weeks. First of all, I want to commend the previous director, Lynn Doyle, for the job she did over a decade at CMHOC. Clearly put, what she's had to deal with, the funding constraints, the overarching level of bureaucracy that's been added the last 10 years has been eye-opening. I've looked at what we're dealing with now versus 10 years ago, and I'm going, I don't know how the heck they did, to be honest with you. Credit to her and her staff for maintaining the best possible service under the conditions they were given. And I want on the record to note that she served with dignity and left the place in the best hands that she could, best place that she could. I do, however, have some observation that I need to share with the board immediately. The morale at CMH is good, could improve. The dedication to serve, it's high, and they want to do more. And that's in my conversations, I found that. However, the lack of space to perform the services to meet our obligations is shocking from a facility standpoint. We have less space than we did 11 years ago. And our budget has increased significantly, and our obligations has increased exponentially. I have staff members sitting in offices with 3 to 4 of them in storage closets working. We can do better than that. This is a county department. We have facilities. We have staff that have nowhere to meet with the consumers that we are obligated to serve. We can do better than that. We will do better than that. It's an embarrassment, to be blunt. They have done the best they can under circumstances that I can't imagine. Out of necessity, we had to do. We are going to have a facilities plan that will allow the community to access services in a way that respects their dignity and confidentiality. I got staff members that have to leave the office when another staff member comes in because they can't have a HIPAA compliant discussion. That is going to change. We are going to respect the dignity of our consumers and our staff. We are a county department. We can do better, and we will. We have extremely high caseloads. We've had to out of the budget constraints. I have support coordinators with 150 people on their caseload. Yeah, they have assistants to help, but we're literally saying it's adequate for them to do person-centered planning for 150 people a year. As a provider for the last 11 years, that is not possible. We will develop a plan. We will address this. You need to be aware that how can you build a relationship with a family if you can't even get to them? The staff have done an amazing job dealing with that. And the budgetary constraints that have created that have been real. This is not an indictment of what we've been doing, but a call to action of where we need to go to become a center of excellence that this community deserves. There's a lack of capacity to manage our obligations. Again, these are just my observations that I will be looking and vetting. I believe in trust but verify. I'll be verifying the statements that I'm making to you. I'm just giving you my initial impressions because you're owed that. And by the way, I work for you. We have one recipient rights officer for the entire county. Let me repeat that. We have one recipient rights officer for the entire county for a budget that is millions of dollars and an obligation for thousands of consumers. She can't even take a day off. We will be addressing that issue. I'm deeming that as emergent and emergency, and I will be bringing to the board and the county a way to remedy. The citizens of this county deserve more than one full-time FTE for recipient rights. How can I answer commissioners' questions or board members' questions on how we're tracking incidents when we have one person and a whole compliance team that's doing the best they can to deal with it? Again, this is not an indictment of what's happened for the last 10 years, but a call to action to approve. We have an IT department that has been, for lack of a word, decimated with people leaving and new people coming in. They are learning. Simple requests from the region on data takes them a lot longer to figure out because they're figuring out our system, their system, their system with new people. They are doing an amazing job with limited resources. I have a compliance department that primarily has one FTE with some help, a lot of good help. We have over 2,000 regulatory obligations to meet. That's a quote, 2,000 over. We have one person plus help. We can do better and we will. We have a finance department that's doing the best they can, but is not at par to what other finance departments and other CMHs have in terms of both FTEs and salary. We have to look at that. We have a utilization management department that's trying to deal with how we utilize services in combination with the region and everybody else. It's very difficult for us to navigate that. So my initial obligations related to these central components is it's no different than 11 years ago. In fact, it's less than the total number of people. Surely we've grown. Surely the obligations have increased. So I will be diving deeper to see what is the true need. I want to bring up my last point for today related to residential services. As your interim director, I'm declaring a residential services emergency. My initial look for the last 2 weeks have demonstrated that we don't have the adequate funding to meet our obligations to our residential providers, both families trying to assist people at home, who I consider a residential provider, and our residential AFC contracts. It's my belief, and I will verify this, it's just my initial impression, especially on the adult foster care side, that we're not even paying a rate that covers the basic cost of our direct care workers to provide the care at an appropriate staffing level. Our residential services logic has had to determine on the sheer generosity of folks fundraising 30 to 40% of their budget to deliver the basic need. I'm not talking about room and board. You go to Benjamin's Hope and, oh, look, they must be doing well. They got all these animals. Well, that's all paid with non-Medicaid dollars. Every dime of that. The only thing we pay for is personal care and CLS delivered by the direct care worker and their supervisors. I'm telling you right now, we're not paying even the basic cost of care to meet that obligation. That is a Medicaid obligation, not a millage obligation. Thank God we have the millage fund, or these providers would have been under. We would have had one notice after another of people not being able to stay. I had the pleasure of meeting with Leah, our residential ombudsman, and she tells me that our kind of family residential providers, we call them mom and pops, our family ones, a lot of them are going to retire in the next year or two. Who's going to deliver that service? Not at the rates we're paying. Not going to happen. I will be doing a thorough examination of residential services at all levels over the next 30 days, for I find it to be at an emergent level and us at risk of providers telling people that we serve, they can't serve them anymore. We don't ask any other Medicaid service to fundraise 30%. We don't ask support coordinators to go out there and do bake sales for 30%. We don't ask for any other Medicaid service to fundraise to deliver that service. It's through the grace and goodness of these providers of sacrifice that they are meeting the obligation that we have, not them. We will be looking at that, and I'll be doing an analysis of what that means. That means consistent rate setting. It means getting the right people at CMH determining our rate model. You got Bill who has to come up here and try to convince you we need this. We don't get these providers, Services don't happen. We need a threshold on incidents. When is the certain type of incidents and the amount of incidents rise to a level that we're like, we don't care if this, we can't allow this contract to continue. We have a great system of doing that with a handful of people, with several hundred contracts. We need to develop a threshold of incidents, of what types of incidents require us to immediately pull a resident out of a residential setting, or active plans of correction for certain incidents are going to happen at every residential setting. They do. I worked in the residential system for the last 10 years. I can tell you they happen, but you have to have a threshold. So with this board's blessing, I will be initiating a residential services review to address the above stated issues, which is rate determination, not covering the basic cost of care, lack of behavioral supports. We're literally expecting our residential providers to be behavioral treatment centers without funding behavioral psychologists or staff to do so. That's not okay. Incident report tracking, all of those things will be part of this. And anticipate it'll take me 30 to 45 days to conduct this review. Entertain any questions. Sorry, that was a lot.
Board Member Byrd?
Yes, Michael, thank you for your thorough and daunting report. You've been dealing with our immediate situation in a number of the items that you've identified as needing a plan of correction. One of my concerns, and this goes back 20 years, we also, in addition to identifying current areas of deficiency or need, we need a demand curve analysis that predicts what's going to happen over the next 5 to 10 years. And just, you mentioned autism, for example. Either we're doing a better job of identifying autism in children, or we have an epidemiological crisis occurring where the incidence is ballooning. And these are folks who are going to need interventions from our system in the future, far beyond what we're delivering today. So I realize you've got a lot on your plate, but if you could also add to the list, doing some market analysis as to projecting our future needs, it may only make a bad situation worse in terms of identifying the need, but at least we'll have some idea of what's going to happen in the future. Thank you.
Mr. Rockman?
Michael, with regard to conflict-free access and planning, in order for us down the road to, I think, make informed decisions about where we stand on this, do you plan to have presenters from people who are doing independent facilitation to self-D and weigh in on their views about, being opposed to this rule and as versus being supportive of the rule? From talking to people who would do independent facilitation, there seems to be some concern that it could undermine self-D. And you've brought that up, that, that's a concern and we don't want to do that. So I think in order for us to really hear both sides of the argument, I think it'd be important to bring those people in to discuss this with us.
I intend to, yes.
Any other questions?
This is maybe more a comment, but I just want to thank you for identifying the pay issues. I believe that in the service sector, we very often rely on the grace and compassion of our workers in lieu of pay. And long-term, that is not a helpful strategy at all, because it leads to high staff turnover and you lose quality people who actually do a good job. And so I really appreciate you bringing that to our attention, and I agree we need to take that seriously.
And for some of the staffing issues that you've identified, are there labor statistics or comparables at other CMH entities that we could use to benchmark off of?
Yes. Just please remember that what makes it somewhat of a challenge for us is that we're one of the few CMHs that are a county department. So we have a hybrid of utilizing county resources, which I like the county resources, in comparison. But yes, there are comparables. I use a simple test at first. Can you have one person doing recipient rights? Well, no, I don't need any labor statistics. But yes, we can develop.
Looking at other
Yes,
organizations
absolutely.
to
And
see
when we
what they're.
do, then you realize that some CMHs are doing what we've done the best they can. And some CMHs have had a lot more of a emphasis on those because they contract out most of their services. Because we're a direct provider, we've kind of makes it difficult. But the answer is yes, we can collect those and use as a comparison.
So there's the ideal state and current state, and somewhere in the middle, we find,
Yes.
where we need to be. Thank you very much. Any other questions? Thank you for a very thorough report. Just going to do what I would like to add to the end of this, because we have an interim executive director right now, and we have two candidates in the running. So the executive committee did meet. We did it over phone, and we developed a transition plan as we were directed and submitted it to the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services. So I'm going to read that out loud and I'll submit it into the record too. Anna, you've been made aware. I think we kind of announced it too. So the Executive Committee of Community Mental Health of Ottawa County met today. At that point, I'd have to go back and tell you what date that was, to determine the next steps for appointing a permanent executive director and develop the following plan and desired timeline. Number one, in accordance with CMHOC's Board Policy 2110, Succession Planning and Leadership Development, the Executive Committee will appoint an Executive Transition Committee to be comprised of 5 total CMH board members. At least of the 2 of the 5 board members, this is number 2, of the Executive Transition Committee will be family members of primary consumers receiving services at CMHOC. The committee did select Donna Bunce and Beth Van Hoven to form the 5. So it'll be Tom Bird, Dave Perrin, Gretchen Cosby, Donna Bunce, and Beth Van Hoven. Number 3, the 5-member Executive Transition Committee will follow the CMHOC Board Policy 2110, Succession Planning and Leadership Development, Section 4. On June 28, 2024, number 4, the following the scheduled CMHOC board meeting, CMHOC will hold an open stakeholders and public input meeting. Community members will be invited to speak and ask questions of the candidates. Number 5, the Executive Transition Committee will make a recommendation to the CMHOC board on the appointment of a new executive director, which we brought to the board for a vote during the CMHOC meeting on Friday, July 26, 2024. So as I said, Michigan Department of Health and Human Services was notified of the plan and they accepted it. And we will notify them of our selection upon approval of this board. So I'll submit this document into the record. I'll have you pass that around. All right, there's the bulk of the business at the top here. And so moving on, the next item is number 6, and that's consent items. Suggested motion is to approve by consent the following items. A, agenda for May 24, 2024 CMHOC Board of Directors meeting. And B, minutes for the April 26, 2024 CMHOC Board of Directors meeting. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Is there discussion?
I do have some questions about the minutes from our last meeting.
Please proceed.
I went over over the tape of the meeting from last month, and there's what I would kind of call some discrepancies. Where in our minutes, it states that the interim director will be appointed by the board chair after May 20. That part is correct. However, that is not actually how that rolled out in real time. And so I had a couple of questions about that. And then after the motion to appoint Anna as interim director, again, it's noted that the interim director cannot assume the position until May 21st. This is true. However, in the minutes as in the comment during that, it's not that cannot assume the position. The statement that was made repeatedly was that we can't do anything until after the 20th. And that sort of is more reflective of the appointment mentioned above
Right.
at the beginning of the discussion with Marcy Verbeek. So, also in regards to that, I mean, this is just me personally. I would like the minutes changed to reflect that that all indications were during about 30 minutes of discussion from timestamp 113 to about 150 on our meeting transcript, was that we would not be making a decision about the interim director until the 20th. Now, that changed because the announcement was made on the 10th of May, which I was just curious as to whether it also mentions that you were going to seek further clarification from legal counsel and DHHS. I was wondering if that had been,
That's exactly what happened.
and
So the Department of Health and Human Services actually indicated that we needed to do this sooner.
okay,
than
and that,
the May 20th date. Was that Friday, the following Friday when we submitted?
that's super cool. And that's sort of what I inferred. I
Yeah,
mean,
and
but there was the point where Vice Chair Parnan mentions that, the board be clearly up to date on everything as it was going on. And that was not transmitted out, which is why when I received a couple of calls on the 8th asking me if Dr. Brashears had been appointed as interim director, my initial default was to say, no, that hasn't happened because according to
Sure.
what I knew at that time, we weren't going to address that until the meeting on the 23rd. And so that was kind of a concerning piece for me in regards to how that sort of moved in regards to sort of like making sure that information moved downstream. But thanks for that clarification. I appreciate it.
And maybe it would be appropriate for us to include the letter. I don't know what other board members' thoughts are from the Department of Health and Human Services that asked us to accelerate that decision-making process.
Yeah, that'd be great. I'd love to
Would
see
that
it.
be, all right? Add that letter. I know there was a scramble.
Oh, for sure. Just out of curiosity, how many, I mean, we widened out the pool. I was kind of curious as to how many
Right.
people actually applied.
We have
Or-
2 so far.
Oh, I mean, this is for the interim because when
Correct, we have 2 so far.
oh,
Yeah.
no, but not for the 2 applicants for the permanent, right? I mean, but when we made the motion to appoint Anna, the idea was that brought out was like, we wanted to widen the candidate pool. I was just curious as to how wide that had gotten, interested in what talent's out there locally. So,
Ms. Brody?
Yes, I'm just wondering if we're kind of getting off track here a little bit because we were
Mm.
approving consent items and minutes. So I think we still need to approve the one consent item that went through, that wasn't contested.
You want to start there and then
Yeah.
we can move on to the meeting minutes?
Right.
Okay. So the motion is to approve by consent the following items. We'll do A, agenda for May 24, 2024 CMH Board of Directors meeting. Do we approve the agenda or the motion? Do we have the motion? We have support. So all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Then we'll move on to B, which we're talking about right now, and it's the minutes for the April 26, 2024 CMH Board of Directors meeting. So, Chris, if we add the letter from the Department of Health and Human Services, I think it was Amanda Zabor. She's no longer in that position. There's somebody else that's taken the position, and Anna sent a letter notifying, we could add, Department of Health and Human Services.
The only thing though is that letter wasn't available at the time of this meeting.
Correct.
And so these minutes really are reflective of the meeting itself, and we're discussing things that happened after the meeting. So these in fact are not issues with our minutes. It's just discussion of what happened that maybe wasn't consistent with what was anticipated in the minutes. So I'm not sure that we don't just go ahead and approve the minutes of what actually happened. And then there's maybe a separate discussion about what happened
Amending?
after. I don't think we would be amending our minutes though, because this is a reflection of what happened at the meeting. And then it sounds like Mr. Kleinjens wants to have a discussion about what happened after the meeting.
Would that be, I mean, yeah, I agree with you 100% that, the minutes are, well, yes, and yes and no. I do still have, I do think that where it states, Ms. Rhodey noted that the interim director cannot assume the position, the repeated statement was that could be no movement made until the 20th.
That was before we talked to the Department of
Right.
Health
Oh,
and
yeah,
Human Services,
exactly,
who
exactly.
superseded
And so,
everything,
yeah,
so,
and I think I mean, from what I understand, if that was like old business, the inclusion of the letter, because that was business that has already, that would amplify that. But I do still think that that's a discrepancy, but,
Except I think I did say that we could not have an interim director assume the position until May 21 because Lynn was working until May 20th. So I do believe this is an accurate description of our meeting minutes. Again, what happened afterwards, but this is what was discussed at the last meeting. And I totally understand that your desire for more information, about what happened after the meeting, but I think these meeting minutes are actually accurate.
not having I mean, I just have notes of transcripts and timestamps. I don't have the whole thing because that would have been daunting, to put it mildly. But without that, I don't see a reason to disagree with what you're saying.
Okay.
All right. So we don't think it would, and I'm trying to look at it from the community members' eyes, I mean, somebody who didn't participate
Yep.
in the meeting. So knowing that the Department of Health and Human Services asked that we speed up the process, we think that's relevant information to have
I-
available maybe in.
I totally think it is, but I just don't think it's part of the meeting minutes from last time because it wasn't available at that time.
Sure.
So I think maybe adding it to the record would be completely appropriate today. Asking CMH to add it in
Sure.
some way would be great to make it public. I agree with you on that.
Okay. That will be our plan. All right. And so the motion on the table is to approve the minutes for the April 26, 2024 CMH Board of Directors meeting. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. All right, moving on to old business. The Millage Steering Committee Social Rec Programs Contract Extension. The suggested motion is to approve funding for Heritage Homes, Inc., ICAS REC Connect, Pioneer Resources, and Momentum Center Social Recreation Programs until 9/30 of 2024. It is further recommended that the above-mentioned social recreation programs must reapply and be approved via the RFP process for continued millage funding after 9/30/2024. Do I have a motion?
I will make that motion.
Thank you.
Support.
Support. And we have discussion?
Yes, are we going to
Rob?
be, I'm sorry, Madam Chair, are we going to be addressing these individually, or is this going to be a package vote?
I think we're addressing it as a package.
Okay. Well, I obviously have a particular point of view about one of these social recs. And I've shared that with the board. And I think I have an obligation to share that with the public, so I'm going to. That's okay. Okay. So we have this motion to continue the funding for social recs until September 30th. There's supposed to be programs for MISUD and IDD consumers.
Will you lean into your mic a little further or bring it forward?
Can you hear me okay now?
Better.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you. You presented with the the steering committee millage program evaluation form, which states the Momentum Center currently supports other programs and services that fall outside of social recreational program scope of millage funding. And I just have to say, things are not as they seem beneath the mask of belonging and stigma-free. Now, it's been said that an organization, is a reflection of its leadership. It's also been said that a picture tells 1,000 words. I guess I'll pick up where I left off on that infamous day, December 18th. Okay. This is a picture of Barbara Lee Van Horsen, leadership of the Momentum Center. She is the self-proclaimed experimenter. She is also known as the sex minister. That's Barbara Lee right there. Here she is standing in solidarity with drag queens, accompanied by children. One is holding a sign that says, "Love is love." And here's the Momentum Center of Grand Haven program calendar event called Love is Love, LGBTQ plus group. Follows a theme. Barbara Lee is the author of the book Sacred Sex, Replacing the Marriage Ethic with the Sexual Ethic. The book review says a sexual ethic begins by recognizing that people of all sexual orientations and gender identities are sexual beings who have the innate right to experience a full and satisfying sex life. I'm not selling the book. This is the book review. Momentum Center is also home to the Anti-Racism Task Force. One of its events, is the cover of the transcript, was a town hall on racism and the educational system. It claims to be a grassroots movement to create a stigma-free community, unless maybe you're white. The guest speaker was Calvin Terrell. Barbara Lee said she was super excited. And here are a few quotes from the speaker. "Do you know what we do in school? We indoctrinate children to sustain white wealth. Schooling is about indoctrinating people to sustain white wealth. If you have some paperwork, draw a ladder with 6 rungs on it." This doesn't look too stigma-free to me. This is the ladder. Now, the relationship between the Momentum Center and CMH does raise questions. SAMHSA funded the CCBHC. And SAMHSA, it promotes anti-racism. Soon after the CMH became a CCBHC, it entered into a service agreement with the Momentum Center. And then CMH became a member of the Momentum Center Anti-Racism Task Force. And here's the Momentum Center movie night featuring White Savior. Jesus is presented as a white supremacist. So this is a documentary film. White Savior explores historic relations between racism and American Christianity. Taglines, of course, racism, American culture, white supremacist American. And they're in the Momentum Center road trips and cultural immersion and claim it's a commitment to be anti-racist for privileged white travelers of Grand Haven. And it warns of appropriation on a global scale. Remember that. And then Momentum Center had a fundraiser to travel to Morocco, where Islam is the state religion. This is the fundraiser. Drinking alcohol is forbidden. So here is Barbara Lee and friends culturally immersing themselves in the Islamic culture with alcohol. Recall cultural appropriation on a global scale? It looks like this. The CMH pays the Momentum Center $298,000 a year, about $24,000 a month, or about another $96,000 over the next 4 months. Because we really wonder, are we paying to manufacture mental health? Is this whom we should be doing business with? Lastly, Barbara Lee was a mission developer for the Evangelical Lutheran Church of America. The ELCA presided over an ordination that included drag queens. That would be the people wearing the clown makeup. Perhaps Momentum Center is the current mission. And I think it's fitting to finish with these verses from Matthew and Jude. Beware of false prophets who come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly are ravenous wolves. You will recognize them by their fruits. Woe to them, for they abandon themselves for the sake of gain. These hidden reefs at your love feast, and they feast without fear, casting up the phone of their own shame, wandering stars for whom the gloom of utter darkness has been reserved forever. That's my discussion.
Is there any further discussion? Van Hoven.
I want to speak to the heritage homes, and I see there's one for, and it must be an actual home, and then one for a social rec program. To Stephen's comments, it's confusing to me where I feel like the lines are a little blurred as far as when we say intellectual and developmental disabilities. And then when I read what like Heritage Homes talks about, how it was created by parents and advocates for housing needs of adults with developmental disabilities, but how it's expanded now for families affected by domestic violence, substance abuse, chronic illness, low income, and homelessness. Not that I begrudge that community, but I'm wondering where we're approving the monies for when I know we need homes for the population of disabled. And so that's where it gets confusing for me when I'm approving these things. How do we determine where that money's going? That's all I have to say.
Thank you.
So
Any
if I
further
may, as a member of, board member on the steering committee, I understand how the multiple and diverse revenue streams can kind of be a little bit hard to kind of like tease out. The first 3 months of our work was ascertaining if the money that we were giving to these programs was being used in an appropriate manner. At every point, we found out that without exception, everybody was doing the programming we were paying them to do, regardless of things that fell outside of that programming that they also did. This was done through repeated surveys that were and inquiries that were sent to each individual organization, looking at their DD-214, or not their DD-214s, their 990s, looking at their financial pieces. That is when we were going back to discuss with these organizations what we would like to see in order to receive this last quarter of funding. Creating clarity in that was a huge part of it. Asking organizations to break out more precisely where the money, the millage money, how it was coming in and how it was going out, as opposed to just being like a general pool of money, was integral to what we were trying to do. Regardless of our personal feelings about programming that they do, what we did discover at each level was that they were doing what we had contracted with them to do within the frame that they contracted to do it. When we asked for things, all we asked them to do was, and to a certain degree, was create more clarity. So it was easier for us to understand, to kind of alleviate some of that confusion that can come up, both here and in the public when they look at 990s, for example. So in that regard, yes, the funding piece was cleared up for this quarter. Everybody else has to come through again. And as part of, I can only assume, will be the reapplication process. Those things that have appeared as far as like how to handle, or how funding is reported out, will be part of the new RFP, so that we don't have to kind of run into this again. This is a 90-day piece that we're looking at, that that is essential for these organizations to finish out the year. And it's at this point, an important piece for them to continue doing what we contracted with them, because without doubt, everyone said that if without the millage funding, they will not do the programming. So that's why there's a sense of urgency to this. But those kind of questions will be things that when the new RFP and the new process starts, creating transparency and clearly delineating what funds go where and what for is going to be baked into the cake, I'm sure.
Mr. Byrd.
We have a quandary here. We have an issue of quantity of service versus quality of service that we're kind of addressing with a motion to provide continued funding. I understand everything that you've said, Stephen, and I agree that many of the things that you've raised to me are personally offensive. And they create an environment where I would not want my daughter to be participating in programs where she was exposed to that sort of thing. The dilemma is, what's the alternative? If I have a child of mine going to that program and that's the only program available, do I withdraw support for that service and then have nothing? So I think as an agency, we have an issue here where we need to take some responsibility for either providing an alternative for our consumers or providing restrictions to our funding so that we have a clear separation of the services that we are willing and proud to support versus those that we have personal questions about. The dilemma, as I understand it, if I have a heart problem and I go to Holland Hospital, do I refuse service there because they also provide abortions that I'm personally opposed to? Or do I limit myself to participating in the services that I need that are in compliance with my own personal ethic? And that's the issue that I'm wrestling with right now. Do I withdraw support for the Momentum Center's extension of their contract and throw the baby out with the bathwater? Or do we try to get a handle on what we're doing so that it's something we can be proud that we're supporting? And I don't know the answer to that.
And one of the thoughts that I had regarding this particular issue and why we had the millage steering committee too was selection, allowing the consumer or the secondary consumer to select what social rec program they want to participate in. So therefore, if you don't have problems with the content, the additional content at Momentum Center, that's your choice. That's personal choice. Is there a way that we can do something like pay per person, for instance, and set criteria for what a visit looks like, for instance, half day or full day? So,
Madam Chair, this is exactly right. It should go through the person-centered process. And if this is what guardians and parents want for their children, that's their choice. I just don't think we as the taxpayers should be funding this. I think to me, it's a political activist organization.
I'd agree with that.
And I understand respecting the wishes of parents and guardians, of course. However, we have a large percentage of our population that are adults capable of making whatever choice they want, regardless of how feel about it. And ideally, in any situation, the goal should be to move as many people as we can to that level where they are self-determining for themselves. So to sort of like, I agree that, that parents and guardians should have a say in this, but a large number of the people that we serve are adults living their lives. And if this is, where they choose to spend part of their day, that's not something that is our place to say, oh, well, okay. Adults matter too.
There's just so much to say in this. I echo so much that Mr. Byrd said. I feel so much the same way, that my 32-year-old cognitively impaired son with autism would not be allowed to visit the Momentum Center. I believe that all people need to have services, whatever that looks like. But I will say to you, Christian, that some of you don't know, I'm the director of Compassionate Heart Ministries, and I too am a social rec drop-in center for people who are cognitively impaired, autism, and a variety of other disabilities. And I personally have had parents tell me, because they're on the other side, that Christian, they aren't young adults who can make that choice to go there. And so parents have said to me, I just don't feel like it's a safe place or option. And so we do have two sides of this that we have to look at, that there are those adults who can make those choices and should be allowed to make those choices. Then I, on the other hand, see the 300 and some people who can't make those choices, that what's going to be safe and best for them. And so it's a quandary. So, you know, and I've had other people say to me, like those optics matter. It matters that people see that. And so they don't, what is really the real picture of what it is.
No, I agree. But I also think, part of what this discussion is sort of like, sort of indicating is that because when social rec was initially stood up, it was essentially regionalized based on geography, but every parent, guardian, adult has the will to go to a program that suits them. It's not, if you live in the Grand Haven area, this is your only choice. I mean, there are means and mechanisms and transportation that can get you where you need to be. So the notion of, saying that someone is trapped in having to go to a program that they might not necessarily agree with is somewhat of a red herring, because there's your program. I know you pull people from all over, like the west side of the county, because of the services you offer and the atmosphere you create. We have that environment. The indication that, somehow people are geographically stranded isn't necessarily, it's somewhat deceptive, I find it.
Ms.
Sorry.
Rhodey?
I guess I just have a couple other comments. One is that, it does appear that Momentum Center has a fair amount of activists, activities going on. And I do believe that if an organization wants to be an activist organization, then there's a place for fundraising in the private sector in order to do those activities, and that's not necessarily, a function of CMH to be funding activist activities. And I also don't think it's appropriate for CMH to be funding things like trips, and I think there would be pushback that CMH perhaps is not funding trips, but there is definitely an appearance that there may be some inappropriate funding things going on there when CMH is providing a significant amount of millage dollars, especially when we have families who are so hurting and staffing needs that are so critical in other areas that just, it just doesn't smell right. And another thing is there has been a sense of entitlement to community funds when things have been presented from Momentum Center. And organizations, especially activist organizations, are not entitled to public fund money, especially when you're serving people in critical needs, with critical needs. It's simply not appropriate. One question that I have is, why is there a difference in funding levels? And this is a sincere question. Why is there a difference in funding levels between these different organizations providing social rec, kind of regardless of what our feelings are in agreement or disagreement with how they're handling their social rec programs? Just honestly, I don't know if somebody has an answer to that, but why is there a difference in those funding levels to those organizations? And even for this 3-month period, I do question that, like, why are we giving different amounts to those 4 different organizations? So I don't know if there's an answer to that.
Dr. Bashir's.
To answer.
Yeah.
Oh. The different funding, I'm going to give you the very simplistic version. I've been on the millage committee before I was interim. I was asked by Lynn to be on it. I've been part of various discussions. I actually developed a survey that we asked providers to complete with the feedback of the rest of the committee. Why are there different funding levels? Simply put, it's based on the original proposals of what they say they needed to meet the amount of people that they could serve. There wasn't a corresponding logic model that says, we'll only fund up to this or a price per person thing. Our new RFP will have language built in to look at that. What is the scope of services? What's reasonable cost? What's the anticipated utilization rate? So the provider simply responded with, this is what we need to do what we say we're going to do. That's how it came about. Now, there's a lot of nuances in that. There isn't like, well, we just said, hey, whatever you want. That's not that. But that's why you have disparity on the amounts. It's based on how many people they say they would serve, the activities they would do, and the cost to deliver that. And that's what we did when we did an analysis of the contracts. I wanted to know, are they doing what we asked them to do? The answer, yes, overwhelmingly. Do we want them to keep doing that in the future? We'll see. The new RFP will be developed and we'll look at the guidelines. My view on all this, it's all about consumer choice. It's all about giving them the choice and the resources, not to have 4 programs, but 50. Have the money follow the person, not systemically giving all the money just to 1 or 2 or 3 or 4. But I will tell you, being part of the millage committee, I was pretty serious in asking that question. And fellow members can attest to this. Like, are they doing what we said? This is our program. We don't like the program. Let's redefine it. And by golly, that's exactly what we're going to do. But I want to make sure that the consumers and residents of this county have a place to go until we get our act together. And that's why I was being part of the millage committee. So I don't know if that answers it, but there wasn't a logic model. There wasn't a per person, per whatever the capacity discussion. It was, what can you do? Show us that, do good with it and follow these parameters. And I got to tell you, each provider did exactly what we asked them to.
I guess I have one more question. I hope you don't mind if I ask you a question. Do you feel that the amounts that we would be approving today would be appropriate for the next 90 days?
I do.
Okay.
Rob, you want to say something?
For the momentum, because they have like flyers that get sent out and there's a bunch of other people that go there. It ranges on the level and some of them have to go through MaxBus and they help them get to where they need and show them how to do it. And they show them how to do certain things that other places don't have. So it differs because some people don't know how, like, what is it? Some places, like, they help show people how to cook, and some places help show them how to calm down, and everyone has that. Versus like in school, they have like some sort of structures, but not all of them have the ability to show them the correct way with outside of school. So structure does help with autism in certain levels.
Thank you, Robin.
I've stopped by the Momentum Center on a few different occasions, kind of one time unannounced. I had a young man take me around, give me a tour, and he was so proud of being a member of that organization. I think we need to keep in mind that it does help a lot of people with isolation, depression, follow through to primary care physicians. I think it could prove easily there's a reduction in both psychiatric and medical hospitalizations. So if you just looked at it from a cost point of view, it really is saving the system a lot of money. I don't agree with everything that goes on maybe. But what I looked at calendars and things, nobody is forced to go to anything. And I don't get a sense of somebody's doing this. Come on, you need to participate in this thing that somebody else might feel is very wrong. I didn't see an enticement like that taking place. So as someone else pointed out, if we say no, we need to be saying yes to something else that's not there right now. It's not there. It would be a travesty to just pull the plug on this. There are a lot of people that go there and get help from that. And we have to be careful we don't throw our personal value into the mix here, where I don't quite agree with this spin here. We got to be careful with that because adults need to make their own choices. If someone is not capable of making their own choice, then that's the guardian's role, to step in and assist with that. But we got to be careful where we're trying to get the community to adopt our personal value system. That's all I got to say. I hope every one of you has been to the Momentum Center. And not like at a formal presentation kind of thing, but just drop in sometime, hang out. Don't let them know you're on the mental health board of Ottawa County. Ask questions of them. And I tell you, I think you might change some of your perspectives if you did that. So that's all.
Thank you.
I appreciate Dave, and I also thank you for what you share, Rem. It's super helpful. And I agree, they're all very helpful, whether it's the Max Bus or Transit or whatever, they're super helpful people. I think, like what I said a few minutes ago, I want all people to have access to services, depending on whatever that diagnosis that you have. Sorry, I don't mean to discourage you guys. My problem from the very beginning has been the combinations of people. And it's because I live in the cognitively impaired world with a son who has an IQ of 54, who's not capable of making good choices. That's the world I live in. And so for me, it's always just been the combination of people put together. And that is the word that comes back to me from other people who know that I now sit on this board. I just don't feel comfortable with all the different people put together. So I appreciate what you're saying. We want all people to have good access and ability to find where they fit in and where they belong, and that positive self-esteem boost, right? We want that. This is community mental health. It's mental health. We want the best for people. For me, it just comes down to that piece of where I live as well.
And I think that argument, Dave, that you're making is a sound one as far as like, it's like applying our own personal value set. But I think that it comes from the other side as well. That's where we're kind of in the middle hitting heads, right?
Sure.
Because, the choices of the parents with children who are more vulnerable are different than what other consumers might make that are capable of making that decision on their own.
And I would just note that one thing that I really appreciated about some of the other providers is that they kept their services clean of the extra.
Right.
And so it was really nice to see those healthy, robust models of really caring for people without putting the extra activism in that makes it difficult for parents to feel confident in their children attending.
And another reason why the millage steering committee was developed too is that we want to be good stewards of our millage dollars. And those are coming up, again, a vote will be coming up in 2026. So this is one of the issues that, has popped up, with some regularity, and we've had different experiences, I think, on December 18th. But, I think the easiest way personally as a board member is to solve it by choice per member per month. But
And just to piggyback one more time, and we just heard Dr. Breer Shears say, there's a huge residential service emergency. And so
exactly.
maybe, when was this? 2016? I can never
Yeah,
remember.
some-
2016, 2017?
8 years ago.
At that time, our landscape was very different than what it is now. We have crises in huge different areas. And so right now, for me, I'd rather see, I'm not saying this we're gonna do, but for me personally, I would rather address some of those emergencies and
Exactly.
figure out something different for our social rec, because that is important.
Mhm.
Krista's
Housing.
crisis in staffing, that's huge, and we
Right.
need to help figure that out.
Exactly. Housing is huge.
It's huge.
Yeah.
Well, because in housing, like if you look at it and look how much they get paid, and then if
Yeah.
they have like a car insurance, or if they have their own phone they pay, or like they are already renting at some places and they are trying to get on their own instead of at their parents' house, they can't really afford it. So by the time like people who are in like Gen Z, who are Gen Z/millennial, they have a hard time when they have a disability and they can't work more hours because it hurts them, because their disability prohibits them to do more than what they can.
Excellent.
So I'm not trying to take over your job, but
No.
back to his original proposal, if we approve this just for the next 3 months, then I don't even know what our millage review committee, because I'm on the millage review as well. And so what Kristen conveyed to is exactly what we've talked about. We've had so much discussion and data collection. If we approve this for the remainder of this, is it the calendar, not calendar year?
No,
but,
until September
September,
30th,
then
2024.
going forward, it's a whole new cat.
Is that committee still active?
Yes.
Okay, so it goes on. Okay.
Yes.
And then, but we've had some people that have like left their position as board members. We've had,
So we probably need to relook at membership.
yeah, relook
Yeah.
at membership and,
Maybe that's something we can do. We can do as
Okay.
executive committee with Dr. Bashirs and Anna. Want to do that? All right. Okay, so the motion on the floor was to, you want to go through this adjustment, continue funding for Heritage Homes, ICAS Connect, Pioneer Resources, Momentum Center, Social Recreation Programs until 9/30 of 2024. Further recommended that the above mentioned social recreation programs must reapply and be approved via an RFP process, which sounds like it's going to be new for continued millage funding after 9/30/2024. All those in favor say aye.
aye.
Opposed, same sign.
No.
And the motion passes. Moving on to new business, which is number 7. We have May 2024 service contracts attached. We have Mr. Phelps here. Suggested motion is to approve the May 2024 service contracts as presented. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Second, and now discussion. Hi, it's still morning. Good morning.
Hey, good morning.
Morning.
How are you, Phil?
Okay, you want to do the usual? Oops, you here, okay.
Yeah, there's some-
How's that? That better?
That's better. Yeah.
Microphone's working great today, by the way. I don't know what you guys did, but it's awesome. Okay, so we'll use regular process, go through all 12.
Pardon me?
Oh, you want to go through the regular process? and
We
discuss?
could, yeah, yeah. Or, yeah, let's do that. Let's walk through.
Okay, the first one was with Heritage Homes. We're adding a couple of codes, community living support codes, to that contract. It does not change the overall, funding, the total. But there will be some associated with that, but it doesn't affect the overall funding total, just so you know. That's the first one. With Sparks Behavioral, we're expanding the service array. Currently, they focus mostly on adults, and they've agreed to help us out to expand to children too. And this is a result of staffing issues that we've had with getting some of our kids' services for home and it'd be family training and then non-family training. Those would be the 2 codes that we added. The next one is Behavior Alliance. We have a person living down in Coldwater, in an adult foster care home in Coldwater, and Behavior Alliance will provide the case management and that type of service down in that area. Night Owl Support Systems.
This is a new contract. This is an organization that will help us with assistive technology. So folks living in different homes or, out in the community, this type of stuff. Deco, this is a amendment, but what we're doing here is we have an individual that we've contracted with for a long time to provide diabetes training for folks that live in foster care homes, for the staff, how to read this and give insulin. We had some issues with insurance. So Adecco has agreed to hire the person that we've used, and then through their insurance, this will save us about $2,500 a year in insurance costs. Flat Rock Manor, this was one that we brought to the board about 3 months ago. There was a 90-day agreement. We had an individual placed in a home in Flint. And since that time, both our recipient rights director and then our ombuds person has gone and visited the home. We've gotten feedback from the individual and the guardian that they're very satisfied with the service. So we're asking continuation on that contract. Favor House, this is an exciting one. This is a new home that Lawrence Davins has created for Ottawa County folks. It's unfortunately it's located in Kent County, but we're going to have all 4 of those beds. A couple of the folks we've been trying to get placed since 2019, so it's been a while. So we're really excited about this home. Our Hope Association. They've created a new, it's called Withdrawal Management Services, and in my mind, that's detox program on the Walker Avenue site and up in Grand Rapids. And this is to add that program to their contract. Next one is Amani. This is a home that we have. This is an organization that we contract with currently. We have not used the Amani 2 home before, though. So we're adding this to our contract to place one person there. Reach for Recovery. This is exciting too. It's a new program for more outreach services for folks with substance abuse disorder. And so we'll have some outreach folks more out in the community to help people with SUD to get services, access services. Sequoia Behavioral Health. This is a new ABA autism provider. Very excited. Talk to them almost every day. They're very excited to move in there. They're currently in the Detroit area and really want to expand out this way. So they got lots of big dreams. So knock on wood, this will be a really good addition to our service array for autism services. And then the last one is IVH Analytics. And this is a contract. This is an extension that we're requesting. This is staff that will help us, continue to help us, primarily because of the staffing issues we're having. So we'll be able to help out with getting data around for our different programs. That's the Schwab.
Good job on having recipient rights go and an ombudsman go to Flat Rock Manor to investigate. Thank you for doing that. Thank you. Yes, Dr. Bashir.
In the future, when we report these out, I haven't talked to them about this, it just dawned on me.
Mhm.
If it's a new program, we'll kind of do them in batches. What's new population group? The table's really good. But I'm sitting here with 30 years experience trying to navigate, reading this thing, going, what I already said, but what is that? So we're going to create a process where it's a new program, it's clear, the population group, services that are being delivered, what that means. Some of these things are very essential, like the expansion of autism services and things like that. But of course, we have Bill come up here and try to do all of these at once and get it done as quick as possible. And it doesn't necessarily lend time to understand the work. So we're going to help Bill out in creating that, because I'm sitting here going, wow, some of these are so important. And some of them are continuations of the expansion of services, but why are we expanding them? Why are we adding codes? What's the point of doing that? They're all related. So I'll work with staff. We'll come up with this. This is a good process, but to me, I'm going, oh boy, now I got to read the rest of it. I will tell you the residential component, especially Flat Rock, I'm glad they went. That's what I was talking about, that we need to develop some thresholds and how we're reporting incidents and what's our level of comfort. It's one thing if the family's like, sure, I'm willing to have them stay there. But if we fundamentally think it's a health and safety risk,
Yes.
that's an issue.
Right.
Yes.
So I think we did due diligence in this case. But it's going to be part of my residential services review to have those thresholds established of what we consider a healthy safety risk, to the point where regardless if somebody would like to choose it, we're not going to say you can choose it from our array, because we have an obligation to protect people, sometimes even if they choose it. Now, in this case, I feel confident. I've met with staff and reviewed their findings in our one recipient rights person. I'm gonna keep saying that because we only have one. And we're going to develop this process, but I was confident with the due diligence and reviewing what staff did with this particular contract, but I am not done establishing the thresholds and limits of what we define health and safety, and when we would recommend that a contract be pulled. We don't want to just rely on people saying, hey, I don't think it's good over there. We have our own internal process so that will be part of that. But I just wanted to add that and some of those observations. I'm amazed with what we're trying to navigate here. But in the future, we'll be able to spread it out. This is new. This is what it means. Here's what it's related to. This is an expansion of a contract that's necessary due to A, B, and C, because I don't know how you get through it in one board meeting in the last 7 hours.
Dr. Bashirs, I want to piggyback on what you just said. In fact, you've expressed what I was thinking. On a lot of these contracts, particularly the new ones, Bill, I'm wondering, is a cost benefit analysis done? You know, that really breaks this down so we have a good idea, make an informed choice about what's the benefit, what are the alternatives, what are we comparing? This is a good use of our money. So, and you've been very helpful in providing us with a lot of information in these one-sheeters. And going forward, I don't know what the process would be, but it'd be very helpful to me to have that information, like a cost benefit analysis, before I dive into a contract and say, yeah, it looks okay to me. Because like Dr. Bashir's plan, you read these one-pagers and it raises a lot of questions about, the coding and what exactly is going on here. And the other thing that came to mind is about with the, like with Flat Rock. Again, I don't think I can really, having a hard time making an informed decision on this, because I really don't know what was discussed with regard to, the managers, the owners of that particular Flat Rock, as far as, what are they going to do going forward with vetting and training, oversight? Is this Mr. Burton still working there? Last I knew from the investigation report, he just got moved to a different location or building. So that didn't strike me as being a very good solution. And in fact, the investigation report, the only reason there was a violation is because supports coordinators actually overheard the verbal threats, which I think substantiated the physical threats, but no witness was found. So therefore, there was no violation found. I guess that whole affair troubles me, and I just really, to be comfortable with, I would like to know, to the extent can be told because of HIPAA confidentiality and these other concerns, what was discussed. Well, again, what was done about this particular incident. And as far as like the heritage homes, I'm curious about, there's been a distinction between facility rates and community rates when it comes to CLS. So I was wondering, Can you tell me what like the CLS unit rate is for the heritage homes? And is that based on community or is it based on facilities?
Like dollar amounts?
Yeah, I'm very curious. There's a distinction being made between the two types of CLS rates. And I'm still trying to wrap my head around why that is. I mean, some arguments have been made, but I guess I'm not completely convinced.
So a little bit of background about residential, okay. So what we do is we pay a per diem amount, per day, total dollar amount. And for, oh goodness, let's see. On the right page, and it's based on different levels. So let's say, it's $200 a day. The CLS and the personal care are based on percentages. So if during the person-centered planning process, someone needs 20% of their day with assistance with personal care, then 20% of that $200 would be billed on the back end for personal care, and then the remaining would be for CLS. So it's really hard, yeah, it's confusing. So it's really hard to say, this is how much CLS for each day in the home, because it's based on their level of care and then their percentages of personal care versus CLS. So those are the two things. With the daytime community living supports, the rate is based on how many days per week the person will get the CLS, and this is in the contract. So then for 1 day per week, the rate would be $4.61, all the way up to 5 days per week, where it's $22.38. So there's a lot in play with this type of stuff, and hopefully that does a halfway decent job of answering your question.
I could probably answer it too. Sorry, Bill. There is no relationship right now on a consistent basis to the level of care need of the person, the cost of care of the provider, and the staffing ratios to do it. These are the things that I've uncovered, that we have to have a consistent methodology. Bill's been doing it with two hands behind his back. Okay? So it's a negotiation with providers. We have some logic model, but that's exactly what we need to develop. It should be very clear and consistent across the board. Providers shouldn't have to guess. We should have to have a formula to determine what the daily rate's going to be. Your daily rate for residential services have two components, personal care and CLS. There should be a logic model that we use to determine that, and we do, but it's not always consistent. There are changing variables. How many staff you need? Does somebody need total care or 3 or 4 more areas of their functioning? So one of the things I was alerting to is this issue. We need a consistent model that takes into account the level of need from the resident, the cost of care, and the amount of staff to do it. Those 3 are not universal yet. That's why you're looking at it. It's trying to get him to explain the rate setting model of like 42 different contracts because each one's individually negotiated, which isn't good because, by the way, I'll just say it, people find out what other people get paid and they can't go, well, why are they getting X
Right.
amount, they're getting Y. We got to solve this in an argument that's defendable.
Yeah.
And that's what we have to do over the next 30 to 45 days. Staff's working their tail off within a system that doesn't allow them to have coherent answers. And I'm not going to keep allowing staff to come up here and try to answer a question where there's no answer really, besides we figure it out at the individual level based on a couple of variables. That needs to change. It's an emergency. Did that help? I mean, it probably alarms people more than anything else, but we have to be honest here. We have a method, but it's not a consistent method.
I'm encouraged that you've recognized the issue and we're going to work through that. Because yes, I hear that comments all the time. You're looking at the rate of pay for all these different providers, and then there's this guideline book out on there. It's supposed to be the same between community and the providers, and it's not. There's no match.
We got to solve that.
Are there systems out there that you could borrow from? And make
I'd
work
like to say yes.
make work for Ottawa County, just.
Yeah, I mean, we can. I mean, a lot of it is just establishing our rate setting principles and applying, and then utilizing that data. But the thing is that really doesn't come, I mean, at Ottawa, we're trying to do the best we can with recognizing the individual provider's need. But it's hard for us to define what is the basic cost of care. So we have to do that and then apply that. I'll tell you what, when we do that, I'm telling you right now, we're going to be short several $1 million in our residential budget. So the way to solve it does require obtaining new funds, but we got to do it.
Yeah. Sometimes the pain points as
Yeah.
a starting point it's a platform to start from. Ms. Rhodey?
Yeah, so I don't know if it's comparable at all, but in foster care, we used to have difficulty of care rates, which were very specific. If you see this, then here's 1 point, so you go through and per client, and then based on that, you have increased rates.
Yeah, we have some tools that do that
Okay.
we use. It's really the other side. It's saying to like a Benjamin's, what is your real cost per direct care worker at this staffing ratio? I'm telling you right now, we're not even covering that basic cost. So it's starting with that principle of identifying that. And then the level of care need is a variable. There's 3 parts of it. And so we have to sit down and figure that out. And the reason why it hasn't happened consistently is because then you go, okay, we need $7 billion, right? But let's tackle that issue before we have providers close down. You think it's expensive now, try to provide individual settings for 30 people that can't live at Benjamin's Hope. You take that number and times it by 11. Right? And I've done individual models at different places and they work, but they're expensive. So we have to tackle that problem so that it's defensible and we can articulate it. That will help us over time with this. And again, it's just been the constraints on the system. I am very proud of the fact that Bill and the crew, Leah negotiate the best they can individually. But we got them out there on an island, negotiating the best they can to solve an emergent need with not a logic model of here's what we do 90% of the time. Here are the outliers. So these contracts are vitally important, but please realize we'll be looking at the continuity among all of this with different providers. I'm very happy for this program, that program. I'm very happy for all of them, quite frankly. But that's the model we're going to have to. We're going to have to develop a defensible logic model that at first is going to be painful, and then we have to find the funding to do it. So
We've identified the problem.
yeah,
Now it's time for solutions.
and the solutions have been amazing. What people have been doing. I don't want to discount that. It's just not sustainable.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
if I
Sure.
could.
Yes.
I don't want to muddy the waters here, but I can tell you, I'm working on blind faith here. When I see the contract for Flat Rock, for example, it says the financial category is $750,000 plus. I don't understand if we're placing one person there, are we saying that we may actually spend over $750,000? Or can you give us, as you present these contracts, if we're placing one person here, what do we anticipate the budget impact will be for that one person at that particular site? That would be helpful in the future. The other thing is, Stephen, you brought up a good point. There's not only a disparity within our network, but there's disparity between systems. Historically, Network 180 would pay a lower rate at David's House Ministry than Ottawa County would for that same person with the same services. And one of the alleged benefits of the LRE that was sold was that the LRE was going to come up with standardized rates across its region, and that was going to wind up solving some of this dilemma. I don't know that that's actually happened. Maybe
Yeah,
you could add that to your list.
It's happening. But let's remember, if you don't fund it, it doesn't matter what logic model.
Right.
If you come up with a standard rate and you say, well, we're not going to give you the Medicaid to cover it, that's a problem. Now, the region's obligated to do that. That is a discussion that's happening at the regional level. You have to get several CMHs to agree. So, it's on the list. I'm pretty clear what logic model I want. pay the actual cost of care and make sure the residents taken care of. Everything else. Philosophical.
Is there further discussion?
Yeah, just follow up. Housing is obviously a big need. And taking a look at the contracts that we have for Favor House and Amani, that, that they're available, serves a critical need. Obviously, I'm concerned about the places we're putting our kids. Sometimes I get the impression that, they're going there because that's all that's available. And I've seen from firsthand experience, it almost looked like they're being warehoused like livestock. And not that the people working there don't mean well, but it just has the appearance that they're just being best managed by being put on a lot of antipsychotic drugs to keep them quiet. And then the thing I'm looking at with these houses, I'm looking at the dimensions of the rooms. And for instance, you're putting 2 people in a 12 by 11 room. And I don't know what people think about that. I mean, if you think that's spacious, it just strikes me as that we're cramming people into a room. My son's bedroom, it's like, I don't know, 12 by 15. It's by no means spacious for one person. You got a full bed in there and a dresser. I'm just trying to picture if you try to stuff 2 adults in there and 2 beds, possibly a couple of dressers. It's almost like being put into a cage. And that's what really startles me about it, about these talks about exceeds the minimums of 35 square feet per occupant requirement. That's like cage size to me. So I don't know how we resolve this, but going forward, when we're looking at housing, I think that's the issue we have to take a look at. What's the environment that the people we're sending to are actually going to live in?
Any further discussion? Right. So the motion is to approve the May 2024 service contracts as presented. All those in favor? Well, actually, probably need to do a roll call vote on this. It's dollars and cents. So roll call. And I know Christian stepped out, but we still, I think, can. Do you know how to do a roll call? It's okay. You can call us by name, like our names, and just say, yeah, you can go there. Yeah.
Yeah.
He's probably using.
Abstain.
I'm sorry, I was asking her a question. Are you waiting on me?
Okay. But
Yes.
you haven't been called on, so.
Yes.
Ms. Wenzel.
Could I ask a question? Is this for the 3 months or is this for a year? For these,
We're not talking about the social rec programs,
right,
but each contract's going to be probably different.
Sure.
Yeah, year
for a
contract.
year?
Yeah.
That's standard.
Um. Yeah,
Yes.
Can I ask a question? Because you made me think of something, Beth. So if we approve these for a year and we are to hear again that there was something going on at Flat Rock, can that come back to us and say, stop the funding or even within that year? I don't mean it to be a silly question, but even though we approve, we can come
We
back
can
and say,
terminate a contract anytime there's a health and safety violation. or
Okay.
concern.
Okay.
Anytime,
That's a good
without even
question.
board approval.
okay,
But we
yeah,
would bring it.
It would probably come back through the recipient rights report.
okay,
Hmm.
thank you. Yes.
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 Oh, and one other question. Is this like a room with like the kitchen and stuff in one room?
No.
So it's just the bedroom?
Yeah. for the
Itself.
Issue that he was bringing. Most of these places, it's full house.
Oh, okay, so,
Mhm.
so there's like, okay.
Yeah.
Yes,
Did you?
yes.
Yes.
Good question.
Yes.
Yes.
Right. It's like motion passes. Perfect. All right. Next item is FY 2024 April financial statements. Thank you, Bill. Sorry. Thank you. And we have Amy how do you say your last name? Bodbile, just like it sounds mass. And suggested motion is to approve the 2024 April financial statement as presented. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Support.
Now discussion. So,
Right, so, financials for fiscal year 24 through April 30th for the mental health and SUD fund, fund number 222, healthy position. Revenues, ahead of expenses. You'll see that our Medicaid funding is ahead of budgeted, what's actually been received so far. Spending within our target range. I don't know if there are any specific questions about any line items, but healthy, we're continuing on mid, third quarter.
are there any questions?
So moving
Seeing
on
none.
to, through April.
April. Yeah, we can move on to the March 2024 LRE FSR.
I mean, I got one question for you. You got listed grants, so you're referring to that page that of all the grants that's listed, that's right to that page?
To go to bill fund as well.
And then we'll get to that.
Yeah, it looks like that's
But if there-
another motion I have to make though. So,
Oh,
yeah,
okay, okay.
just I'm kind of looking at the way it's a
So the LRE is, I think, more
LRE.
information only. Wanted to. review those statements. Questions, is that what you're suggesting?
Yeah, just does anybody have any questions regarding the LRE FSR? Attachment G. Seeing none, so. Again, I'm probably going to call on a roll call vote for this. So the motion is to approve the May 2024 service, or I'm sorry, April, to approve the fiscal year 2024 April financial statements as presented.
Oh, I guess I got one more. Madam Chair, one more thing
Okay.
about the grants. Are you able in the future to put together like a file that we could access the grants? You know, us on the board, if we want to read the language, the terminology of the grants?
Not sure.
Okay.
We have a grants manager that has that information. I think a lot of that's shared online as well, but.
Yeah, we can look into see what we'd have to
Those
do it.
We could just, it's like a concise folder, so when we come to these meetings, you know, we know where to find it.
And I said not sure because I didn't know where they were located.
Yeah.
So,
All right. Quick. Go to a,
We did put together like just a summary of grants
Right.
and, in general. The idea that,
Yeah, I just think the devil's in the details, so that's why I like to see those.
all right. Any further questions? Go to a roll call vote.
Yes.
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 She's in the bathroom.
Okay. Ms. Wick?
Yes.
Yes.
All right, motion passes. And last but not least, the mental health millage funding. Suggested motion is to approve the 2024 mental health millage at the maximum allowable mills and forward to the Ottawa County Board of Commissioners. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Support.
Is there discussion? You know, Amy, the maximum allowable, what that would be?
I don't know what the roll that, I can get that information for you.
Would be good. Do you know approximately how much, so it's approximately $4 million right now.
Right.
What would that bring it to? Because we also had increases in property taxes. Has there been an estimate?
We do have a budget. I don't want to speak on it without looking.
Sure.
Treasury did distribute a budget. That's, I can share that.
Okay, maybe next meeting too. That'd be great. All right. So the motion is to approve the 2024 mental health millage at the maximum allowable mills and forward to the Ottawa County Board of Commissioners. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion passes. Now we've got a discussion item, and that is the adoption of a resolution to oppose MDHHS decision to implement conflict-free access and planning in Michigan.
Yeah, that's me.
That's you. All right.
So like I said earlier, I sent you information we have in your packet. I'd like you to look at it. I'll be sending out more information about it. And some educational opportunities. Of course, the state would like a resolution now. However, I'm not exactly sure the general public, families, guardians, and others know this issue in a comprehensive way. And I would hate for certain stakeholder groups to view an opposition to this as a rejection of conflict-free. And so I wanted to give you this information and just say that I may come back next, at the end, I think we have another board meeting this month, right? At the end of the month. And ask for said resolution after some robust dialogue and education sent out. Because I know I have at least one stakeholder group that's in favor of, I believe, the philosophy of conflict-free access and planning. And we just have to make sure we understand what the true impact is for our specific organization. Specifically because we directly operate a lot of services. There are some views, maybe not articulated here, that we couldn't have our access department and our teams as part of the same organization. I have to make sure that's not true. That it'd have to be another organization that does either the service delivery or the access and planning, regardless of the number of firewalls you may have in your organization. I saw this happen when I was at Hope Network. When I was at Hope Network in Kent County primarily, but all throughout the state, this came about by policy by Network 180 to have conflict-free, and Hope Network was no longer allowed to have supports coordination and residential services. Because at the time, supports coordination was the main element of authorizing the service. And so major providers in those areas had to disconnect clinical like delivery of residential services from everything else. I just want to double check this isn't what this is, because there's a lot of confusion. And some rural areas are exempt from this already from the state, they're saying. Does this relate to the CCBHC model at all? There's still some questions, so I didn't want to have you make a resolution today without addressing all those variables, even though the board association, CMH Board Association is like, hey, please do this now. I just have to get a little bit more educated in what we're looking at this. I know it's been presented here before, but I want to just have this on your radar. Next month, I'm going to come back with something. Please read the materials that I've sent you.
And I think our next meeting's June 28th, because this is a makeup meeting. So twice in June. So is that where you're thinking?
Yes.
When you think you'll propose the resolution? Great. Any questions?
I just want to add something to that. I've spoken to an independent facilitator who's concerned about opposition to the rule. And she shared with me some comments. She said, folks with mental illness who need CLS reports are not given the choice of a provider for CLS because we do that in-house. And I personally heard these words that a meeting with families served on the mental illness side of the agency. She says this would be an example of conflict of interest. Other examples, people are told in some parts of the state only services that the CMH offers. For example, many folks do not know they can get a therapist from outside of CMH. Other communities, folks are told that Medicaid service is not available because they do not have it. And so her comment is, you think about when the same person offers this services and explains this service array, works for the agency that provides some of those services and the same agency that manages all the money, there's bound to be a conflict. And she comments, it's not harder for me to use independent case management and or broker independent facilitation. In fact, she's found that she's gotten better service. So you've mentioned this, and I think that's just one of those issues we need to closely address going forward when we're talking about where we stand with respect to this conflict access and planning. And again, how it dovetails into trying to do independent facilitation. I mean, I guess in my own experience, I've kind of encountered what seemed like a conflict, just trying to get CLS hours for our son and being told that we're going to have to knock 30 hours off right off the top because he could go to school, even though through our person-centered planning, that was not a good option for him medically right at the top. So we had to appeal that. And I don't think that there was any nefarious intent. I just think maybe that's just how things have always been done. And we've always done it that way. So it was presented to us in that way. And it maybe just a misunderstanding about what services or the service array is available and what is obligatory that you must take. And it's just not the case. And that's where, the independent facilitation was invaluable to us because we wouldn't have known about that. And so I guess I keep coming around to the importance of hearing from independent facilitators and their opinion about this resolution.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Seeing none, and I know Mr. Byrd has to leave for another board meeting he is chair of. This might be a good spot because I think we've already done the executive director's report. General information, comments, and meetings attended. We'll move on then to public comment. Second opportunity for public comment.
I wish you'd stay, just for my comment. Barbara Lee Van Horsen from the Momentum Center in the city of Grand Haven. I find it incredibly uncomfortable to find myself in a forum where aspects of my life are framed and presented without any context, and I have no opportunity to respond. I hope that if you have concerns about me personally, that you will show me the respect and the common decency to sit down and hear my story, my history, my work, and my values, which I don't believe are very different from any of yours. To the charge of political activism, I know that I am too connected to my nonprofit in the public eye, so I have intentionally refrained from any kind of political activity over the last couple of years, even though as a private citizen, I have every right to do so. The Momentum Center has never engaged in politics, and until a blog started to spread misinformation about us, we had a reputation for hosting and facilitating important community conversations about controversial issues in a way that brought together different perspectives for respectful conversation. In fact, that's exactly what the nonprofit was doing for 2 years before we even started the social recreational program. And that program is what CMH told us it had to be, which was a program that included mental illness, SUD, and IDD. Millage money supports only that program and has only ever supported that program. If the Momentum Center has any component that you might label activist, it would be our commitment to serving anybody and everybody, regardless of their background or their beliefs. Our town halls over the past 2 years have focused on suicide, the impact of COVID, and emerging drug trends. Our trips are an income stream. And I have reiterated these facts and many more often enough that you, as CMH board members, should be able not only to explain when people ask you about our work, but to advocate for what the Momentum Center does in this community. And if you still have questions, then please, as David suggested, stop by, come in, and see for yourself. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sheila Detloff, Holland Township. I found the discussion on the social rec programs to be very distressing. I think Mr. Byrd hit on my concern exactly, reacted to Mr. Rockman's diatribe by saying, I find it personally offensive and I have personal questions about this. You're not here to let your personal point of view affect your decisions. You are here to objectively evaluate the decisions that come before you. Because I guarantee you that for every personal opinion you have, someone feels the opposite. Mr. Parnan noted this when he said that we have to be careful not to throw our personal values into the mix. Yes, you are here to bring your perspectives and experiences to your decisions, but not your values. Also, it sounds as if some of you are assuming that parents and guardians would not choose a program like the Momentum Center, that it would only be chosen by adults who can make the decision for themselves. I challenge that. Again, your values are not everyone's values. As far as what Ms. Rohde said, the only reason there's an appearance that CMH is funding any activities other than what the funds are designated for is because certain people are pushing that narrative. You could just as easily make it clear that funds are being used only how they were designated, but you choose not to. As a taxpayer and a voter, I'm very happy to see my tax dollars going to a program like the one at the Momentum Center. Thank you for passing the final quarter of funding.
Any further public comment? Good morning.
Rosalie Austin, City of Holland. I'm just grateful you all can have, conflict is gonna be everywhere and that there's this healthy, robust discussions about everything and we may not agree on everything, but I appreciate the questions and everyone is pretty respectful. But the issues are deep and you have to make the difficult decisions and they are difficult. And I'm glad that she's bringing up the direct care worker crises. There is a shortage of workers. There's not enough workers to do what they do for the amount we can afford to pay them. And one of the contracts is the Alliance thing or Night Owl, the assistive technology. Can we get like a presentation? What exactly do they offer? What is this going to replace human assistance or is it cameras? What exactly is it? Is it how are people being monitored? Will it help? And yeah, that's all. I'm just.
Thank you. I know in the healthcare setting, we were starting to use cameras for one-to-one in patient rooms, of course, with permission. But just to help at night, for instance, for people who had sundowners. So I'm wondering if this is technology that's similar. So, all right, any further public comment? Seeing none, this meeting is adjourned.